and I'll be your host for the next hour. As we gather here, we acknowledge that we live, work, meet, and travel on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples that have cared for this land, now called Canada, since time immemorial. I want to go through some technical stuff first. It is up on the screen, but you can see we do have a chat function here. I'll start with the language. If you do prefer to listen to this conversation in French, we have live translators available, and you're able to see up on the screen here where you can select your language down the bottom of your screen. You can switch to French. So we have a live French translator here. We're really proud to provide that to you. If there's at any point you have need some technical support, there's live support down at the bottom left-hand corner who's able to help you through that. If there's audio issues, anything technical related, they'd be able to help you. I also want to mention the chat. So just to the top right-hand corner, you'll see a speech balloon, and here you have the ability to put some things in the chat. You can throw your questions in there if you'd like. We'd also love to hear, as we're starting to prepare for our next CIFC National Fire Management Conversations this coming fall, we'd love to hear some ideas from you on what you'd like to see us cover in the coming year. So love to hear your ideas in the chat. Please help us there. So every month, the CIFC Research and Innovation Integration Committee hosts a National Fire Management Conversation. These conversations are recorded and posted on our CIFC YouTube page. We are so pleased that you could join us here today. Today, we are joined by Dr. Mike Flanagan. He's the BC Innovation Research Chair in Predictive Services, Emergency Management and Fire Science, Faculty of Science at the Thompson Rivers University, and he's also the Science Director for Canada Wildfire. Dr. Flanagan will share with us his thoughts on what we should expect to see for weather this year. We will then switch gears to speak to Scott Tingley, who's the Manager of Forest Protection for Nova Scotia's Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, and Todd Nesbitt, who's the Manager of Fire Operations for the BC Wildfire Service. We will chat about how their agencies are preparing for this upcoming fire season. And so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dr. Flanagan to hear about what's coming down the pipe. Welcome.
Thanks, Maria. Good day, everyone. I am coming to you today from Kamloops, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Squampum people. So what's the fire season going to be like this year? The questions started rolling in early this year, given what happened to the exceptional record smashing off the charts 2023 fire season. So there's lots of interest. By background, I did work as a weather forecaster. I took MT course 35 in the 1970s. They discontinued it after our class. They started a new series after that. But I did work as a weather forecaster. And let me tell you, weather forecasting is a challenging and humbling profession. I was doing some forecasting this weekend and Monday for some prescribed burns and getting the winds right. Oh man, so we have trouble forecasting the coming week. What's the season going to be like? Well, who knows, to be quite honest. It's maybe not the answer you expected, but or maybe it is the answer you expected, but yeah, it's really challenging. So, and maybe, to start, what are we forecasting? Okay. So weather, the fire weather, and in Canada, we use something called the Canadian Forest Fire Danger Rating System, in particular, the FWI system, the Fire Weather Index system. And people do use that, and that's an easier challenge than going to number of fires and or area burned, okay? Going back to the FWI system briefly, a lot of people use the seasonal severity rating, and that's kind of what it was designed for. And it's just an exponent of FWI. So it kind of gives extra weight to higher values because they're more challenging in terms of mop up and things like that. But forecasting the number of fires and area burned, that's even more challenging because, things that people do. We start fires, we manage or try to manage the land, we manage fires, and of course, how much lightning you get, how receptive are the fuels, leads to how many ignitions you get. These are all things that will impact how many fires we see and how much area burned. And, that bottom picture on the left is from towards the end of September in 2023. And you can see pyro CVs, pyrocumulonimbus, talk about things that are difficult to predict. Those are up there. And we had a record breaking year last year. And, this day was the busiest day in terms of area burned in 2023. It was near the end of September. Wow, that's just crazy. And when I wanted to advance the slide, I go to my normal spot, and it's a different spot here. But by the time we're done, I'll get to it. Okay. As I mentioned, forecasting is challenging, and it's kind of like what's going to happen in the next week or two, and you can get hourly forecasts and you can get daily forecasts. When we start getting beyond, what I'll call the typical weather forecasting range, and some people call it S2S, sub-seasonal to seasonal, it's more temporal average. So, down below you can see the forecast for Kamloops. I'm not sure how they did. I took this from a few days ago. It tells you April 24th, it's going to reach, 16 degrees or what have you. Seasonal forecast won't say June 12th, it will be 23 degrees with an RH. No, it's not that precise. We use things like weekly averages or monthly averages of temperature, precipitation, or if we want to use SSR or DC, drought code, these are things we can do. Forecasts are improving, and I think I have a slide near the end of the deck. We are getting better in the weather forecasting. The seasonal forecasting, and someone shared this with me from a presentation in Boise. Seasonal forecasts other than equatorial areas suck. Okay, and maybe that's a little dramatic, but there's a point there being made that is a chaotic system. And maybe I'll talk a bit more about that later. Okay. And I did it again. So already we've seen stuff in the media, okay, and there are certain federal government ministers making statements like this, and I think this is really ill-advised, and I'm being really polite because I don't want to say, well, anyway, ill-advised is what I'll stick with, because no one knows the future, and to say things like that, given that 2023 was so exceptional, over 4% of our forests burned. The previous record was there's multiple data sets, okay, for fire in Canada. The previous record, if you use the good data set, is about 6.4 million. Okay, if you use other data sets, about 6.9 million. If you use other data sets, it may even be 7.5 million. 2023, with the good data sets, going to come around 15 million, maybe a bit more. So it's more than double the previous record. It's extremely unlikely we'll see anything like 2024. It doesn't mean it can't be an active year. It may very well be. And then you get, other things in the media from experts. And here I have in the top right-hand corner, BC did a seasonal forecast. It's really a monthly forecast, and they're very transparent in what they're doing. And these are quite well done. And, and I'm sure other agencies across the country do something akin to this. There was a federal briefing recently, and it was quite well done. Spring and summer 24, you'll see the highlighted thing, and well, that's not quite true. Okay, we are transitioning to neutral and maybe even La Nina, maybe by summer, probably by fall. There's updates by the Americans that are well done, and El Nino is gone. Okay, winter was warmer than normal, much of Canada. That's true. Widespread drought, that's a big concern. Snowpack was reduced, or snow cover, above normal temperatures, ECCC, and most other long-range seasonal forecasts are just saying the same thing. Forecasting precipitation for the next few months or even longer is problem. I'm going to show you some examples of this. Precipitation is a real pain, okay, for forecasting. So temperature forecasts are more reliable compared to precipitation. And, forecasting the 500 millibar or 500 hectopascal, if you bring me to the 21st century, is a lot easier, and skill scores are even better for the 500 millibar. Skill decreases with increasing forecast lead time. That should come as no surprise. Our forecasts for day one, i.e. tomorrow, are much better than day two. Well, or better, not much better than day two, day three. By the time you get to day 7, 8, 9 for forecast, the skill really starts to drop. Okay, but it's much better than it was 20 or 30 years ago as we make improvements with our models. And this is a scary map. Okay, like this is from the Canadian Drought Monitor. I'm sorry, I meant to put the link on that slide. You can see pretty well from coast to coast. It doesn't quite get up to the Arctic Ocean. There are areas that are dry or extremely dry or in drought. And of immediate concern is northeastern BC, northern Alberta, and southern Northwest Territories in terms of forest fires. This is an area where there's been a lot of zombie fires as well, overwintering fires that survive. And, this is nothing new. The Fort McMurray fire started May 1st, 2016, declared out summer of 2017. So we've had them before, but we had so many overwintering fires. BC had around 90, Alberta 50 to 60. There's lots in the territories. I don't have a number. And there's some out east too. That there's reports of some near Val-d'Or. So, we are seeing these fires that are overwintering. And most years, they're not a problem because the hot spots are in the interior and the black. And so with the snow goes and spring comes and it's got nowhere to go because everything's burnt. But last year, because there's so many of them and the fire season went so late into the fall, they didn't have time to do mop up around all the fires. And I don't know if they could, because things like Donnie Creek, and Donnie Creek isn't the biggest fire. Donnie Creek's about the size of Prince Edward Island. And so going around and trying to put hot spots in the perimeter, it's just not doable. So some of these have the potential, potential is a key word through this whole talk, have the potential to spread. And so the dice are loaded for spring. The stage is set for an active spring, but it still depends on the day-to-day weather. So you can have everything ready to go. You still need ignitions, and you still need that day-to-day weather, that hot, dry, windy conditions. And if you don't have them, it may not be such a big problem. So there's lots of seasonal temperature forecasts out there. I prefer the European. ECMWF is clearly the best model in the world. I know it upsets Canadians and Americans and every other meteorological organization, but they demonstrably are the best models, clearly the best models. And just as an aside, we're doing some work with BC Wildfire Service looking at ensemble model prediction, and first indications is that European is far superior to the Canadian and the American ensembles for fire weather forecasting. They're not in the same ballpark. But, here's the global map, and there's kind of a North American map, and it looks like it's going to be warmer than normal. And, warmer than normal means there's potential for more fires, just for a number of reasons, including relationships with lightning and the fact that as the temperature gets warmer, the ability to suck moisture out of the dead fuels increases almost exponentially. We call it vapor pressure deficit. So warmer conditions sets the stage once again, or the potential for active fire season. But let's look at precipitation. And this is once again from the European model, but precipitation is much more challenging. And you can see, I have 3-month periods here, and you can see that, northern BC looks wet. Out east looks wet as well. It's this dryness coming from Mexico, Arizona, through Colorado up into Saskatchewan, and that's the concern. But you have to take these with a lot of salt. Okay, and I'm going to the next slide here. I brought up the Canadian model, and I left the European model. And remember what I was saying about northwestern BC looking abnormally wet? Well, the Canadian model has it abnormally dry. I don't trust either of them, to be quite honest. So, and that's the challenge for trying to do a seasonal forecast, is when you don't trust them because they have little to no skill. The exception being ENSO and other patterns, regions of the world. Yes, there is skill, but just anecdotally, for some things like El Nino, I could take things to the bank. Okay, like warmer and drier in Alberta El Nino winters. That doesn't seem to be the case as much anymore. And maybe it's a changing climate. I'm not sure, but it's just long-range forecasting, seasonal forecasting is really difficult. Okay, and so with all that, fire season did start early this year. I think it was February 19th. It was declared in Alberta, and the overwintering fires that we kind of discussed here. No one knows the future. That's the bottom line. Fire season will depend on the day-to-day weather. If we get blocking patterns, upper ridges that are stagnant to semi-stagnant, it could be a bad fire season. Okay, that's what happened in 2023. It started in early May with a record-breaking heat wave, and that started the season off in northeastern BC, Alberta, and Southern Territories. Yeah, fire season in the Northwest Territories in May. It's incredible. And then attention shifted to Nova Scotia and then Quebec. But we had anomalous patterns in our upper air circulation. If we get to a normal pattern that's more transitory, and that's the way things are right now, and typically with that, you get a low pressure coming through every 3 to 5 days, giving you some rain, followed by high pressure and then a low pressure, just a train, and you don't have a fire problem if you have that set up. So we have to wait and see what the weather brings. And there have been occasions where one bad fire year is followed by another bad fire year. So it can happen, but it's also possible that this anomalous circulation by the atmosphere will be in Siberia this year, or it will be in the Mediterranean, and it's kind of like whack-a-mole. So it may be our turn again. If we get another 2021 heat dome, look out. And a paper just came out the other day relating heat dome 2021 to fire activity in 2021, and it plays a major role. So I think given the overwintering fires, given the drought, there's the potential, the odds are that we're going to have an active spring. As you move into summer, confidence drops, okay? Because, we can try, getting forecasts half decent for a week or two. So I'm not sure if I think I got a couple more slides here. Yes, there is some hope. I mentioned that it's a chaotic system. So, and the way weather's done right now is equations of motion, and we have to solve them numerically, and that's why we use supercomputers, and they churn out billions, trillions of operations to give give us a forecast. Now, there's some machine learning techniques that are showing promise that do it much quicker. Though I would suggest caution in certain areas, especially northern Canada, because they're built on historical climate data. And if you have good historical climate data, hey, I think they make good forecasts. If you don't, I'd stick with the physics-based forecast at least for the time being. Good regional monthly forecasts. Yeah, the job BC's been doing has been really bang on. But we need verification, validation for all these forecasts. And there has been some that have been done and ongoing. The Weather Shield work in Ontario, it's regional, i.e. it's for Ontario, but they do have some skill at seasonal forecasting. So that's something we can build on. There's papers from quite a while, and there's a number of them. And Shabar et al., they use something called SVD. No, it's not a disease, folks. It is singular value decomposition, and it takes sea surface temperatures. It takes the entire sea, not just ENSO, which is just a particular area of the Pacific Ocean. It takes all sea surface temperatures and related to SSR, seasonal severity rating, and it actually shows some skill for areas from Quebec all the way to the Yukon. So there's work that we can do. This is an area of active research, and it's going to continue, and hopefully we will get something that is a reasonable forecast, but it may be constrained by our chaotic system. So it's worth investigating, because a seasonal forecast could be a valuable tool in preparing for the fire season. There are weekly forecasts as well, and I took these from my favorite model, the European Center for ECMWF, and I picked this week particularly for folks in Alberta, because May is the busiest month in Alberta, unlike any other jurisdiction in Canada, and there's reasons for that, and weather, it's one of the reasons. And I picked that weekend because it includes the long weekend, which is also has the potential to be a very active period. And you can see that the European model suggests it's warmer than normal, which is consistent with all the models, but it also suggests that it's going to be dry. And once again, I'm throwing salt over my shoulder because it's a long ways. It's still a ways off, and precipitation forecasting is challenging. So I did put the link there for folks who want to check out the products at their site. So bottom line is, stay tuned. Odds are we're going to see a fair bit of fire and smoke this spring, and who knows for the summer. All right. Thank you for your attention. I think that's my last slide. It is.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dr. Flanagan. Really appreciate that. I want to let everyone know CIFC also has a recording version of, I understand, of a CFS who's done a similar seasonal forecast last week. Always good to gather all the information we can get leading into the fire season, of course, with lots of salt. Is what I'm hearing. I want to offer, we do have some time. So the chat button at the top right-hand corner, there's a speech balloon. And so if you click on that, there's an option to add questions into the chat. We do have a question here. I'm here from Ontario's Northeast region. From a mobilization standpoint, are there any changes to CIFC mobilizations for out-of-province crew movements? Okay, so that's a very specific CIFC question. I guess, Christopher, if you could, if I'm missing some sort of weather-related part of that question, please add it there. If not, I'm going to have to maybe see if I can get some answers for you and get back to you on that. And I'm just going to move forward. Is this webinar recorded? Yes, would like to share this with a few friends. Yes, this webinar is recorded and available at our CIFC YouTube channel. You can Google CIFC YouTube and should bring you right there. Most of the, we're looking at getting all of the webinars up this week. I think most of them are up there. There's a couple we need to still load from the spring.
So Marie, I can jump in on that question from Ontario there.
Thanks, Todd.
Just sitting on the RMC, we haven't had any significant changes to any of the procedures we have for out of province crew movement. So from that perspective, we should let Dave officially weigh in, but there's nothing earth shattering or significantly changing from my point of view from the RMC.
Thanks for that, Todd. Just a cute little comment about one of the slides being a photo credit to Dennis Quintilio. Did he come out of retirement, or is this his grandson?
Yeah. So I do use some of Dennis's photos, and some of those are from 2014 when the territories had a bad fire year, and particularly he has some nice pyro CB shots, and that may have been text left from a previous PowerPoint, which was that this current one was built from. And but when you see pyro CBs, I try and give credit to the photographer. The first slide was Maureen Smith. That first pyro CB was from Sparks Lake, which was, don't get me going on pyro CBs or we'll be taking up the rest of the hour. But that was from 2021. And, it was just amazing. Like, you can go fast forward, right, on this things. Okay, well, almost fast forward. Yeah. So I always like to say, is this a fire or is this a thunderstorm? And, take a poll. And I see there's an option for polls here, but it's obviously both. Okay. And this generated lots of lightning strikes, started a whole bunch of new fires. These are beasts. And, last year in Canada, we have 140 of them, mostly in BC and Alberta, and the territories to a lesser degree. The previous Canadian record was 50. The previous global record was 102. So last year was a record breaking for pyro CBs as well.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat. Can you define how you're using the word skill in the context of describing how good different models are?
Thank you, Matt. So for weather forecasting, we often use climatology. So you do a validation, you compare your forecast to what was observed, and let's use something simple like SSR, even that's, or temperature, even simpler. And you compare it, and then you use climatology. So you take the last 30 years and what was the temperature for that day or that week or that month, and how does your forecast compare to using climatology as a forecast? And if you can't beat climatology, you have no skill. You might as well use climatology. The other common benchmark is persistence, which is a really good weather forecast. Okay, it's less good as a climate forecast. Okay, so by persistence, I mean the forecast for tomorrow's temperature is the high you got today. So if today in Kamloops, if we got to 16, I say my forecast tomorrow is 16. Okay, and it's a really good forecast. Okay. Except for when the cold fronts come through or the warm fronts, that transition zone, then it sucks. Okay, but those are benchmarks. So for climate or seasonal forecasts, and we, that master's work I was talking about, machine learning, weekly forecasts showing some skill. That was done by Jessica Zerb at CFS. We look at weekly values and we did use persistence as a test, and persistence saying, next week will be the same as this week. And for week 2, actually, it did have some skill. Okay. And so if your forecast can't beat climatology or persistence, then you have no forecasting skill. You might as well just use persistence or forecasting, or climatology or persistence.
All right, thank you. I know my microphone's a little sensitive here. So Dr. Flanagan, it's so great to have you here. I'm really grateful to have you.
My name's Mike.
Hey, that's what I usually call you, but I was trying to be more formal here today. So Mike, you are here with us, I think, for the whole hour. So there is some time at the end if you have questions for him. I think it's a great opportunity to pick his brain for sure. So if you have any additional questions for him in the chat, please continue to populate that at the top right-hand corner. Yes, I think it's the opposite. It's very strange.
Yeah. Maria, you may want to just put a plug in, because at the end of the hour, you're going to talk about the weather with seasonal forecasting, the fire season forecasting challenge coming up. So
yes,
the hook
yes.
here, folks.
Thank you. There's a hook. There's going to be, yes, a forecasting tournament coming up. So it sounds like it's anyone's guess. So we'd love to have everyone involved. I'll have a slide about that down at the end of at the top of the hour, the end of the webinar. Share that with you. Came from Dr. Mike Watton, and Colin McFadden's been working on that. So more to come here shortly, but we're going to switch gears a little bit. Again, add your questions for Mike, and also questions as we go through a conversation we're going to have with Todd Nessman and Scott Tingley. So welcome. For those joining us late, we have Manager of Forest Protection Scott Tingley from Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources and Renewables, and Manager of Fire Operations Todd Nessman with BC Wildfire Service, here to give us a window into the pressures CIFC member agencies are facing going into 2024 and how they are preparing. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. With the fire season ramping up, as Mike said, in Alberta, I think it started February 18th was a new date that they had for this year. Dealing with holdover fires. It was difficult to get more people on the panel, but I think we've got a great group of folks, and I think, we've only got a half an hour to get into all this stuff. So let's get rolling. I wanted to start with Todd. Thank you for joining us. I'd love to hear what kind of pressures you and your agency, or just your agency, are facing going into this fire season. Let's start with a broad general question.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Todd Nessman. I'm based in Kamloops at our Provincial Wildfire Coordination Center. When we talk about pressures, reflecting on the season like we had in 2023, many pressures come out of seasons like that. And we've seen it on a few different fronts. So I'll try and keep this somewhat brief. But when we talk about pressures, there's organizational pressures, there's people pressures, there's the environmental pressures around us, which sort of Mike touched on, the road ahead, what the season looks like. All of those things are leading to pressure to the organization. For us, it's really been a challenge after the 23 season, how we have handled that. For those who've been in the business a long time, you have bad seasons. You're hopeful that you have a chance to unwind and decompress and reset before you sort of head into another season. For us, we felt a lot of these pressures from this past season, and having some of what we're hearing, the narrative that's been created and is being said out there, is creating more pressure for us, the angst, the anxiety around the seasons and potential ahead. And I know we're not alone in that. I know many CIFC agencies had tough seasons, felt pressures, and they're probably going through it much like we are this year. So when we look at how we're trying to ready ourselves and sort of get prepared for another season, it has been a challenge. I'm not going to lie. The tough season, we haven't really had a great opportunity to reflect and make changes and adaptations to what we learned after 23. There just hasn't been that much runway to get some of that work done, which is problematic, and with seasons like this, you want your staff to have that ability to unwind and then reset, like I say. But when you have tough seasons, there's always pressures and things that come with it to make yourself better and get the organization in a better standing for the next season ahead. So that's been a challenge for us. We've experienced political pressures of sorts. We're in an election cycle this year in British Columbia, so there will be that will be front and center for us. Directly, we're not impacted, but wildfire is top of mind in BC, and it's prevalent in the news every day. So that is something that creates more pressure, the pressure to perform and to do our jobs well. We're experiencing more criticism, perhaps you could say, higher scrutiny than ever before. And that comes with the territory. When you have a season where 2.85 million hectares are burned, there's going to be impacts, and people will feel it, and they will express how they feel about it. And so that is creating more pressure on the organization to get ourselves ready to be one step ahead of some of the critics and where they think our shortfalls are. And I think we've done a good job on sort of being proactive in many different spaces. One of those areas, folks outside of BC may not have heard, but we had a Premier's expert task force that was put together to help us reflect on the 2023 season. And some of that was to look for opportunities of how we were going to strengthen and grow and develop the organization. Some of the work the task force came back with were things that the organization was already had well in hand, and we're taking steps proactively to advance. So if you're interested, there's lots of information on the web around the expert task force. I won't go into too much detail here. But those are just some of the pressures we have felt. As Mike had said, the road ahead for us, we don't know what it's going to be, what the season's going to be. Will it be another active season? Hard to tell. We have to wait for May and June and to see how that plays out. All we can do is prepare ourselves, get ourselves ready, and have a bit of a reset on the mind of what a challenging season looks like, with the belief that we're going to be ready, and we've taken all the steps we can to have our people prepared and ready for another season. So maybe I'll just cap it at that, Maria. Sorry, I could be a little long-winded on that.
No, thank you. Really covering a lot there. Just, when we talk about going into 2024, there's no way we can really separate that from the experiences those had in 2023. And, your point about, well, we're just not even, you weren't suggesting BC, but, it was a really tough season, I think, to get through. And then the thought of that, we have another one coming. Yeah. So, Scott, probably what you heard from Todd really resonates a lot with your experiences in Nova Scotia. Same with you. What sort of pressures is Nova Scotia facing going into 2024? It's always hard to be the second one to go, I'm sure, as you said, very similar things. But yeah, let's hear from Nova Scotia.
Not too hard to follow, because I could probably just echo everything that Todd said. And when you contrast us, opposite ends of the country, scope and scale differences, really what we're living down here is exactly what he's going through out there. Tough season. We're typically in a net exporting province, helping out other agencies. We don't, we just don't see seasons. We haven't traditionally, like we saw last year, terms like unprecedented, never seen before, largest fire in Nova Scotia's history. That's all the context that came into 2023. And for us, really, the season, fire activity wise, wrapped up kind of like late June. It all kind of happened in April, May, mid half of June. And then we had flooding, and some tragic outcomes from that as well. And then the rest of the season then supporting Canada. So, pressures, we're not typically used to, through the off season, if you could call it that now. We had, continued interest, through media, public engagement. People want to know, what are we going to be doing different? What are we going to change? And a lot of those pressures, it's about, managing expectations and trying to be responsive to what the expectations are going to be around, everybody wants to know what we're going to do differently about response. What are we going to do about prevention? Those are the key themes that keep coming up in a lot of the media stuff. So some of the typical pressures, staffing, there's always kind of moving around and transition and things like that. Overwhelming kind of offers for support and services, whether it be, a lot of vendors reaching out, a lot of innovation out there. As a small agency, we don't have a huge team to kind of take in all this information and assess, but, we want to be, so we're leaning on, partners at CIFC, groups like FP Innovations. We're trying to get as much kind of collaborations help as we can to kind of keep on top of stuff like that. And then, and it sparked, all the interest that we got. We got a lot of attention last year, and kind of the silver lining was a lot of people became aware of the risk of wildfire in Nova Scotia that maybe weren't paying attention before. It probably always has been a challenge to get a lot of engagement, but with the huge surge in interest in fire smart prevention, what can I do in my community? What can I do in my home? Again, now we have to focus people and resources, and it's a good thing. It's just it's a challenge. It's a pressure, right? We're working with the same tools and people. We're just trying to do more. So, yeah, very very similar story to Todd. So.
Yes, thank you. I want to talk a little bit about communications, if there was anything sort of learned from last year. I know that was a big topic. I had heard coming back from Matt Leave is really around miscommunication, that sort of thing. I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about some prevention and mitigation. But before we do, I want to, we talked a little bit about fatigue and coming out of 2023. Is your agency looking at managing that any different this year? Is there anything that you pulled from last year as some successes? But there's an obvious fatigue factor, I think, with personnel coming out of 2023, and just wondering if there's any tactics your agency is looking at, or it's really difficult, I know, to recognize issues and make the changes, in a very quick period of time here. But any thoughts going around at your agencies? I guess I'll move over to Todd first.
Yeah, it's a great question. Fatigue is probably one of the biggest pieces that I think everyone grapples with on how you manage fatigue and how do you keep your workers safe, and what can you do to have a smooth running operation. Like, that's the reality, which it's very difficult to achieve all those things all at once. So we did some work this past off season. We have something called an Operational Safe Work Standard number 2, which looks at our fatigue management. So we've had a team that has spent time and energy around that, and so we're kind of in the midst of reviewing how that went for 23. Excuse me. We, the focal point of that really is how can we have improved rest? How can we do better in feeding our people? How can we improve sort of the hygiene, the supporting hygiene pieces around our staff? And so those 3 were kind of the areas that we wanted to focus on, and trying to get people good sleep and feed them well, and not have them, show up late at night and have no food options. So the team has put a lot of effort into improving that space for the organization. Just around hygiene alone, like the research that has been done around some of the carcinogens that we're exposed to in the air and on our PPE and what we're breathing, there's a lot of work that's been done in that. So how can we do better to improve that environment for our staff, whether it be shower facilities or washing facilities for our the clothing and apparel. So those are pieces that this team is all looking at as part of a bigger sort of total worker health package, that initiative that's been underway the last few years here in BC. But it's all, you can't look at some of this in isolation. It's a bit of a whole worker view on how we can strengthen and improve and help our workforce. So maybe I'll just turn it back to you, Maria.
Thank you. Yeah, Scott, I'm actually going to switch gears to prevention with you, Scott, here in a moment, but there's a couple things I want to add on the fatigue and wellness piece. There is a new CIFC community practice started up, I think, through the Resource Management Committee. So they're starting to do work in this piece at a national level, just sharing best practices, that type of thing. It just occurred to me, Todd, as you had spoke. So we'll hopefully hear more from them as the time goes on. Mm-hmm. And I also want to it sort of fits into here, and I really wanted to put something in the chat. So thank you, Mike, about the mission critical work that Canada Wildfire is doing. There's a course in December. Just wanted to bring your attention to the chat. This is about leadership. This is about providing opportunities for leaders in wildland fire management. They're also going to be having folks outside in general emergency management, and it's really about digging into resiliency. So resilient leadership, and that goes into the impact that seasons like 2023 have on you and your families. So a really interesting course that I encourage you to click the link on and learn more about. So thanks for that, Mike. Scott, so so there's a flood of money coming federally for prevention and mitigation. As you mentioned, it's really great. We've got some awesome opportunities, but we have to come up with these opportunities really quickly. So no doubt that's adding a little bit of pressure as well as we move forward, and then also going into fire season. So whether you want to touch on that or not, I'm not sure. But in terms of prevention and mitigation, given the potential for another busy fire season, were there any sort of renewed focuses that Nova Scotia is looking at in this space with the potential increasing fire load that you'd like to share from Nova Scotia?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, like you said, with money comes pressure. It's a wonderful thing, but it is coming in a flood. So we do have our agreement signed up with NRCan through the Wildfire Resilient Futures Initiative. So that's going to be a great thing. And again, back to managing expectations. There's things that we're trying to shift on, in real time here, and be responsive, and also kind of set the expectation for folks that there's some of these projects that are going to take us multiple years, to get to our goals and outcomes, and we can't do it all at once. Certainly, we've had a surge and renewal of support just generally, from our communications teams and our outreach teams. This has been made so we provincially, for example, we have 3 outreach coordinators that are part of our branch, part of our department here, and they support all the different programs that our department delivers. But wildfire prevention has been kind of identified as one of their primary focus areas, and that came out of last season. And so they've been great and continue to be, and that's been a great evolution for our department. I guess for Nova Scotia in general, is not necessarily like DNRR, but I think it's worth mentioning. As a department, we actually kind of ran into a little bit of stumbling block here. We lost our wildfire prevention officer, so we've got one dedicated kind of prevention person. A lot of people would know her, and Karen McCurdy, but she has moved over to Halifax Fire and Emergency. So I don't think I'd be stepping on their toes, kind of just letting. I think that's a great initiative by the municipalities. Halifax being our largest municipality in the province, they just created a new position. So I believe it's called a wildfire prevention manager, and there's going to be a team over there dedicated to wildfire prevention mitigation and fire smart initiatives. So I think provincially, as a whole of society, kind of lens, that's great for the whole team. And so we're going to be recruiting, obviously for a new prevention officer. But I think that's worth mentioning, in that broader context. So those are kind of some of the highlights. And
thanks, Scott. As you said, a busy fire season, there's nothing better than a busy fire season to help prevention the following year, hopefully, although people forget pretty quickly. So hopefully that helps, as you mentioned, not often top of mind out there, but hopefully is now after last year. Thanks for that. And Todd, anything going into 2024 you want to add in terms of prevention and mitigation? Yep. Oh, let's see if I can unmute you.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
No, my colleagues at prevention would be cross with me if I didn't throw in some plugs here myself. So yeah, prevention has been really a hot topic in the province of BC, and so there has been quite a bit of effort put into this fire smart space in British Columbia, as other agencies have also, and it's really gaining some attraction. Like, people see the effects of impactful seasons like we've had in 21 and 23. And they're starting to pay attention, which is good. I mean, it's unfortunate it takes that level of activity till people see that, okay, there's probably ways I can prepare myself and my home and my property. We're also seeing it in some of the communities, lots of activity around communities and how they can prepare. And so it's been good seeing the movement that we have in British Columbia. There's more to do, obviously, but it's a good start. And I think, like I say, it's one more piece that will help, in how we handle wildfires. It's not the be all end all, but it is one component that I think people have some control in, and can contribute. And I think more people are sort of going on to that and understanding it, which is great.
I was on mute. Excellent. Thanks for that, Todd. I'm sure your prevention and mitigation group would be very proud of that. Just a note here, it's true. 700 people gathered in Prince George this week for Wildfire Resiliency and Training Summit, hosted by Fire Smart BC. So pretty cool.
800 actually is what I've got. So yeah, lots of interested parties for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just have a couple more questions. Again, add them in the chat if you want. I was going to ask one more and leave time for questions, but I don't see any questions in there, but hopefully we get more. So we'll see where we go. We'll start with the first one. Communications. So yes, I heard lots about misinformation. There's only so much an agency can do about that. That's just the nature of the beast. But is there any challenges that you experienced? I mean, I heard there was challenges. So if you have any reflection on the communication piece, so is your agency tackling information flow differently this year, maybe? Were there successes from last year you'd like to share? I'll start with Todd and then I'll go to Scott, if that's okay. Since you're unmuted.
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of progress in the communication front, and it's not just from this past season. Going back into seasons of 17 and 18, those were active seasons for us as well, and 21. We've had some lessons learned, and I think the big shift that we've made internally is to try and be more open, transparent, and provide information. And so we've not only done that on the incident front and sharing what's going on or trying to, we're also, involving people there. They have ability to interact more with us. We've created the Wildfire app that people not only can see what's going on, but they can also report fires, send information, provide pictures, which it's more interactive. And I think that's good, having people see those changes. The other pieces we've done some good work on is trying to be more proactive and tell our story on what's going on and what we do. And there's a lot of misconception out there on how fires are fought and how resources are used and what is the best tool in that. So the team has actually done quite a bit of work through videographers on promoting, take a topic and they will go and dig into that topic and create a video and put it up on YouTube. And so we've had excellent sort of buy-in, and people actually appreciate seeing the information come forward. It helps their awareness and understanding. And so we're slowly seeing some progress on that front as well. And we have lots of demand for more information coming through, those different sources, which, 5-6 years ago, we weren't necessarily using YouTube to promote and explain sort of our business and what we do. Yeah, those are just some of the pieces that I think we've seen positive change, and it's really paid off for us.
Thank you. And thanks to Karen from Canada Wildfire, who added the YouTube link for BC Wildfire videos. Thanks. Great. I love that idea. I can't wait to click on that. Scott, anything on your end in terms of communication? Did you experience the same last year? Are you anticipating the same this year? What's going on there?
Similar. Yeah. I mean, running into a season, if we had never run into before, we had fires going for weeks and weeks, Nova Scotia. So we had, and we have great support. So we don't have a dedicated, we don't have staff within our department that are dedicated like communication officers or anything. So we have communication department is part of the public service, and they support a number of departments. And so obviously when the fires were ongoing, high priority, they had dedicated, I think, most of their team to supporting us. And I think that the daily briefings that were held, we had the premier online, usually myself or someone from the Provincial Fire Center would be a rep. And then we also had the PIOs from each of the major incidents. I think that went a long way to getting quality information out broadly, and did our best to, misspell, kind of, dismiss or kind of get rid of as much misinformation as we could, but obviously it was still out there. We had people kind of monitoring the social media forums and things like that. And there was always something out there, but yeah, similar to Todd, I think, and they did do, they made some videos with the PIOs explaining, just basic stuff, fire terms, status, explain how we fight the fire, posted to YouTube and similar success. So I think that will continue. And, we're in the middle of producing some prevention videos as well that are going to be going out on social media, and initiative we haven't really done much of in the past. Some very professionally developed material. So yeah, very, very, again, very similar to Todd. Coming out of a season like that, a lot of similar tactics and ideas. So internally, worth mentioning too. I mean, we've out of the fires, and actually really started kind of in Hurricane Fiona for us, was the use of Esri ArcGIS and field maps and producing good internal communications, on fire status and what's going on. And it was helpful to have, broad access to that across the department. And so managers, firefighting staff, everybody had virtually real-time information on kind of what was happening at the fire. And that helped, that internal communication flow, which I would think would help, because a lot of our field offices would have people coming in looking for information as well, not just reaching out to, our provincial center and things like that. So I think that was very helpful as well.
Thank you. It just occurred to me as Scott, and Todd were talking, I think probably 10, 15 years ago, if you were speaking to the manager of operations, they'd have lots to say about suppression and wouldn't really be involved in communications or, or, all these things that we're touching on today. And so your roles are really evolving to be all encompassing, and the amount of, pieces that you're managing so much more. So yeah, interesting as these fire seasons continue on, how your roles are evolving. And yeah, I mean, obviously you have people in your agencies for communications, prevention, and mitigation, but needing to be touching on all those pieces. Yeah. We only have 4 minutes left. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'm just going to repeat it again. Just to the top right-hand corner, there's a speech balloon. I do have one more question, but I would like to hear from the audience if possible. And then I do have one slide that I want to share as well. So I'll just keep it for a moment. See, okay. And while questions are being populated, I will ask the question around resources and personnel. So I've heard that, we've heard the federal government wanting to give a lot of money, so we just hire more firefighters. I suspect that's not as easy as it sounds. I'd love to get your perspective on that. Hiring more, everyone thinks we should do it. What are the challenges? Have you been successful? And if so, what were your tactics? We'll go over to Todd.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it was only that easy. So organizationally, we just crested 2,100 employees. And so we have seen our organization grow immensely in the last, 10 years. It's nowhere near enough, unfortunately. So, could we add another 3,000 firefighters? Sure. Definitely would help. It would also bring with it its own challenges and problems. This is where we lean into our resource sharing partnerships. And that's sort of I would say the best approach, because you have trained professional partners that you can rely on. We're also seeing it in British Columbia that we're looking for non-traditional sources of engagement and support in this space, which in the past we haven't. We've been pretty isolated in how we respond to fires. Now we're involving more communities, more fire services and fire departments, more First Nation engagement. So we're seeing sort of some shifts in how we're responding and who responds with us. And so that's a big piece here. Like, yes, we could, in the short term, we could add, 5 more unit crews and, some more initial attack crews, and it would help for sure. It's not going to solve the big picture though. Like, that's the challenge for us, is we'll never get away from not having enough resources or having enough, whatever that is. You know what I mean? The reality is, on a busy season, we'll have 5,000 people working for us. Would it make sense to have 5,000 staff year round? No, probably wouldn't. So I'll maybe leave it at that and let Scott have a shot at this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. We're not growing the agency at the moment, but we're looking at how to increase capacity with what we have. So with what happened, internally as well as externally, there was everybody was offering to help. So that was a great opportunity to figure out how they could. It was overwhelming in the moment, but one of the highlights that did come out of the season last year was what's being referred to as, our volunteer reserve force or auxiliary. So, we were able to hire 24 people. There were some conditions they had to meet. They had to pass our fitness tests, had to have their own PPE, had to have training, be a member of volunteer fire department. But that was an opportunity for us to try something different. And, so we were able to, increase some capacity there last year. And so what we did this year was just pre-planned for that. So we've already done the fitness testing and the screening. We've started to build a list of people that are available, kind of as an emergency hire, and so that's been good, and we'll continue to build on that. Like Todd, engaging more communities, continue to kind of support First Nation communities and training capacity building. There's a sort of big surge of interest there, and we want to continue to work with those communities. Yeah, just in general, within our department, even across, broadly across multiple departments, has been renewed. Everyone learned a bit more about how fires are fought and managed. They learned about incident management teams and different roles. This is one of those, goals. It's going to take us a number of years to kind of build up. You can't just turn on a new management team. You can't even just turn on a new firefighter. That this all takes time. So, but there's a huge surge of interest in people that want to get training, find out, how do they get on the path to get, to a leadership level and things like that. So we're looking internally to expand that capacity in places in the department we hadn't been looking before, or other departments. I think it's worth mentioning too. It's going to remain to see kind of how this transpires, but the government did announce, there's going to be a new Department of Emergency Management. So it kind of looks right now, taking a few other departments and kind of joining them up. And again, that'll be, at the moment, our department is not necessarily going to be part of that, but I think that's going to add a focus and a bit of capacity to the incident management as well. And kind of to Todd's point, with some of this internal capacity building that happens, and some of these ideas that we traditionally hadn't been kind of tapping into or whatever, the idea would be to kind of relieve some of the pressure nationally. So we may not have to, or Todd may not have to, or whoever it may be who's having a busy season may not have to reach out as much and as far to get support. If we can, that'll take pressure off the broader system. So. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's certainly work being done, and continue, to look for new good ideas.
Thanks, Scott. We are at the top of the hour. It just flew by, didn't it? I told you it would. So much more to cover. There was a quick question that we won't have time to cover, but you touched on it, Scott, that maybe you'll be looking at other departments, emergency management, as agencies turn into emergency management. There's less time off in the winter. So just there was a question that unfortunately we don't have time to field, but that a really interesting note. And so hopefully we'll have follow-up conversations here. Just on the screen, there is information, and also in the chat, a link to the fire site. That is a forecasting tournament. So we encourage everyone to get involved, even if you're a weather person or not a weather person. That's what it's all about. So I encourage you to take a look at the link, and I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Todd and Scott. I know you're really busy as you get into this fire season. Thank you so much to Dr. Flanagan, to Mike, for joining us here today. We want to thank everyone that attended here today, and this was our last for the season, and we wish you a happy and healthy fire season, and we'll see you back in September. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.